Science is mostly fake and condoms are kind of gay is the latest analysis, if I can call it that, from the Daily Wire's great thinker, Michael Knowles. You might remember this guy because I've been on his show a couple of times. I stopped doing it because the number of horrible threats and anti-Semitic comments I would get when I appeared relative to the upside, which was essentially nothing, got to the point where I just started turning down the invitations and they stopped inviting me. But that's the Michael Knowles I'm talking about. I'm going to play 2 clips for you here. These clips are important because this is more than just, I don't know, Tucker Carlson's immigrants make the country dirty. This actually goes to the attack on some of the foundations that allow us to create a factual undergirding for discussions. When you put forward such a distorted and dishonest view of the world, there's very little that we can actually talk about or sort out because we have no shared basis in fact. I'm going to play these clips, then we're going to talk about them. Here's the first one about science.
On the cultural front, a man like this should be ashamed to present himself in this way in public. We used to have standards and norms that discouraged perverted men like this from presenting themselves in these perverted ways, with the pink hair and the psycho affect, openly talking about chopping up little kids. Men should be terrified to do that sort of thing. And if they have any of these absolutely perverted and sadistic desires, they should keep them to themselves and they should work on themselves and try to cast those demons out of their bodies. And that's the cultural level of this, of course. But then there is the even deeper level that I haven't heard a lot of people acknowledge, which is this is yet another reminder that science is mostly fake. And not that scientism or the politicization of science or whatever other squishy language the more centrist kind of people want to grant, but the whole endeavor. The whole endeavor of the scientific revolution, the premise of which is that reality is fundamentally physical, that is flawed. It's not true. The modern scientific culture has given us certain nice things, but it's given us a lot of bad things as well.
All right. It's mostly fake, he says. And then he goes on to say that condoms are kind of gay.
Why did Gallup show a 7-point drop in support for same-sex relations of any kind? Because people are beginning to pull on the thread of transing the kids and realizing that because ideas have consequences, bad consequences come from bad ideas. And so they're going all the way back, and forget redefining marriage or whatever. You go all the way back to the beginning of the sexual revolution. And you go all the way back to contraception. There were 2 cases, Eisenstadt and Griswold. First was Griswold in 1965. Then Eisenstadt comes around in 1972, the year before Roe v. Wade. And Griswold finds a right to condoms within a marriage. Where is that in the Constitution? I have no idea, but some libs on the court discovered that magically in 1965. But they said, but there is no right to condoms outside of marriage. Then 7 years later, the court discovers, oh, actually, there was more invisible ink in the Constitution, and actually there is a right to condoms outside of marriage. Okay, maybe you like condoms, maybe you don't like condoms. I don't know where you're going to find that in the Constitution. I think a lot of people are beginning to notice that the contraceptive mentality is the beginning of the pride mentality.
By the way, if you're wondering what this guy's talking about, he's completely out of his mind. The question is it a character he's playing or does he believe this stuff? But it doesn't matter. Let's listen to the last few seconds.
Because the contraceptive mentality divorces sex from the consequences of sex. It introduces a sterile sexual ethic, which is exactly what gave us the Pride movement. There's no distinction here. If you can't read between the lines, the conclusion that one draws is that condoms are kind of gay.
Okay, so this is a very unserious person, like extraordinarily unserious. Let's focus in on science is mostly fake rather than condoms are kind of gay, because both of these things are stupid, but science is mostly fake has particular implications that I want to discuss. Science is not a collection of facts that are real or fake. Okay. Science is a process of investigation, discovery, and revision. The revision part is a big component to this. If you go and talk to whoever his pastor is or whatever, and you say, hey, I want to talk about revising a bunch of the stuff that you preach, you're going to be looked at like you have two heads, okay? Because the revision aspect is actually a big part of what makes science such an effective process. Science is real, but sometimes it doesn't have the answers, or the answers change over time, or it takes a while before we get our first provisional answers. And in a sense, everything in science is provisional to the extent that even when we have a theory, which is the empirically based, accepted explanation for a phenomenon, it can still be subject to revision. Substituting some religious text or ethic or morality for science is not a valid and respectable alternative, which is what underlies much of what people who say science is mostly fake actually want. Science is a human endeavor, and that means it's subject to the limitations and sometimes biases of the people doing it. But the whole point of the scientific process is to limit and restrict the impact of those biases. There is a real, you could call it a crisis in science today, which is the replication crisis. That refers to the difficulty of sometimes reproducing the results of many scientific studies. There are a bunch of meta-studies that say, here's 100 studies, we tried to replicate the results, we were only able to do it in half of them. So are half of the other studies actually legitimate or bogus, or what's the issue? This affects many fields. This affects medicine, economics, sociology. It's not just what you would think of as science. And there are many possible causes for the replication crisis. And this could include issues with statistical methods, or publication bias that favors positive or novel results, or the pressure to publish in academia in order to continue getting grant money, or lack of transparency and openness in sharing data, or issues with peer review, or whatever the case may be. So science isn't perfect in terms of always giving us the completely right answer immediately, but it certainly isn't fake. And unlike the religious texts that some of these people worship, science doesn't claim to be a final answer or a dogma. Science claims to be a process that, if done correctly over time, narrows and points us towards what we would consider, yes, a material or physical reality, which Michael Knowles denies is a thing. So saying that science is mostly fake is exactly the type of simplistic black and white thinking that these MAGA people want, love, and often build the justification for their own movement on. And Michael Knowles, listen, I don't think he's stupid. I actually wonder whether this is a character he's playing and he doesn't mean any of this stuff because it's profitable. He used to be an actor and that didn't go well. Is this just another version of acting? And I don't say this to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm just saying whether he believes this stuff or not, it's equally damaging. But given his background, I find it possible that this is just a character he's playing and he doesn't mean any of this stuff. I don't know. Be interesting to know more about. People in my audience trying to quit smoking or vaping, this is for you. You can't vape or smoke inside. You're tired of people seeing you put those little pouches in your lip. There is a nicotine alternative that people won't notice to help you quit. Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Our sponsor Zippix makes the only nicotine toothpick on the planet that is FDA registered. You can use it anywhere, work, restaurants, airplanes, sporting events, after a meal. The toothpicks stay in a convenient little tube that goes in your pocket or on your keychain. It's way more convenient than carrying around a huge can of pouches all day or a whole bunch of gum or whatever the case may be. Zippix nicotine toothpicks come in flavors like peppermint watermelon, sweet wood, cinnamon, whiskey. If you're not a nicotine user, try out their B12 toothpicks with caffeine instead, a quick and easy alternative to coffee. Do your lungs a favor, cut the cigarette smoke, cut the vape juice. Quitting has never been easier with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Go to zippix.com, get 10% off with the code PACMAN10 at checkout. The link is down below.